Hi, welcome to Couples Therapy Bites.
I'm Steven.
I'm Erin.
And here we are,
We're here.
post our home has flooded. And if you're wondering, we look like we're living in a home. That's because we're living in my sister's home right now because our house is unlivable. So we're really grateful to them for letting us stay here. But yeah, if you haven't seen our house flooded like a week ago, we've posted some videos about that, and we'll give you a link in the description to those episodes if you'd like to catch up. But it's been tough. It's been
Really hard.
It's been hard for sure.
It's sort of like a whirlwind. It almost feels like it didn't happen a little bit, but then I woke up this morning just really heavy.
Yeah.
Like heart heavy, mind heavy, like an exhaustion, like you only know after something really hard has happened.
Yeah. It's so daunting.
It's overwhelming what's coming up. It's overwhelming thinking about what, whatever.
What's been lost and all that.
Yeah, it's hard. We're having a hard time. There hasn't been a ton of time for reflection. We have 3 small boys, which we've also mentioned. And
Which is awesome and great.
Yeah, we are so thankful
They're
for
wonderful.
them. And there isn't a lot of time or space, especially because they're feeling all the anxiety of what's happening. So they're wanting a little bit or a lot more of us, and just sort of more like, tell me we're okay, tell me we're okay, tell me we're okay. Are we okay?
And we're like, I don't know.
We're like,
maybe.
yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then another thing I've been thinking a lot about, when I've been thinking about this. We were at our friend's house, and while we were in and out of our own home, we went to a neighbor's house who was also a friend. And I was thinking about her life, and she grew up on the street where they live now. And I thought, like, oh my gosh, how amazing, like, to be living on the street where you grew up, and it's just so beautiful. And then I started thinking, my life is separated into segments so drastically and dramatically. And this is what I was telling you a bit about on the road. Like, I feel like I've been very resistant to calling my life, childhood experiences, trauma or traumatic, because I'm resistant to that. I don't like the sound of it. I feel like I have too much privilege to name trauma. But seeing this for my kids, like noting like there's a before this flood and there's an after this flood. There's a before Alma died and an after Alma died. Yeah. And like your life being changed so...
Like instantly. Like at the drop of a hat. I mean, they're 7, 5, and 1.5, you know, like...
I'm 36.
You're just not...
And I feel...
You're not used to that.
Oh.
You're not used to that death, and yes, it's just like stuff. It's just a house, but it's so displacing. Like
oh, it's so unsettling.
You know, everything's gone, and like, so where are we gonna live now? And so what are we gonna do? Are we gonna be able to get a new house? Are we gonna, you know, all this kind of stuff that just, I think to a little person, it is just shocking.
Well, again, I'm 36, and
right.
It's shocking to me. I don't...
Right, but I think what you were talking about, too, is how this shocking feeling also then taps into those other times when you were a little person, and there are those shocking times as well.
Yeah, I feel a lot more ready to name my childhood events, or the ones that were anyway, as trauma, because I can see it from this perspective and this vantage point. Like, oh my gosh, like there are very distinct befores and afters in my life. Like, that was before my parents were divorced. That was before my dad really sort of, the mental illness sort of took over,
before he had a psychotic break.
Yeah. And that was after. And you know, like there's all these like big events, traumatic events, and I had wanted so desperately, a big part of why I went to get my master's in counseling was because of that, my experiences around that, and wanting something else for our family. I wanted to give our kids an experience, a childhood, a life where there weren't these traumatic events, these big befores and afters, but there was just more of a flow to their life.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, that's when we lived on this street. That, not like, oh, that's before Amma died.
Yeah.
Or that's when we still had our home, or whatever the the situation might be. And that's been a really big loss for me this week, knowing that these traumas are entering their life.
Well, I think one of the things that was, I'm sorry, the sun is shining in on my face. I think one of the things that I was really struck by in our conversation was you said, Stephen, I know I have a master's in counseling psychology, but I think I'm really understanding what trauma is, and it is that experience, you just said it, of these sharp distinctions before and after.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great description of kind of what happens at times in trauma, is that things are one way and then all of a sudden they're different, and that difference feels so threatening and so frightening and puts you in such a state of fear that it changes your world for the rest of your life. And I think that you kind of saying, oh, that makes me more willing to even claim some of my own childhood difficulties and traumas as what they really were and are.
Yeah.
That's what was really unique to me, and I thought really powerful, because you have experienced some really, really difficult things that are characterized by that sharp before, after, everything's changed, it will never be the same kind of type experience that I think trauma brings, that loss brings.
Yeah, and I think, yes, right. I think that's exactly how it felt, and how I was able to name that and sort of take it out of a heady definition and like, oh my gosh, this is what trauma means for me in my life, and for me as a mom in my boy's life. And it also has shaped the conversation that we're having about these next couple of weeks, days, months, years, about this triggers in me. Like, see, I told you.
Bad stuff
is gonna happen to us.
And it always does.
It always happens to us. And I have such a tendency, and it is something I go in and out of actively working on, of holding really tight, like, I don't want you to go because I know what happens at the end of this story. Like, I lose everything. And not like in a woe is me kind of way, because I won't even name it as trauma, which is part of why I have such a hard time letting go, because I have such a hard time naming. We can talk more about that one day, but Stephen's comment back to me when I was saying all this is, he said, well, now that you've named it, you have a responsibility to heal, which was just like, oh, come on. It was beautiful, and we can talk about that too, but it is going to be a big wrestle, like, and we have to like rebuild our house, we have all these other things to do with, but also I have to fight despair and the idea that I'm about to lose all of it all over again, that I'm gonna lose some of the boys, or what's the next bag of things that's gonna happen.
Because you have lost people, a lot of things, in really traumatic ways. Your mom dying, your dad committing suicide, your dad being a prescription drug addict, your dad having a severe psychotic break and having a significant mental illness.
He's just putting all my business out there on YouTube.
Your parents divorcing, domestic violence in the home. I think that's why these things feel so powerful. And in a way, for you to finally be able to claim some of those things as trauma, it really does go back to that point. Like, that's actually wonderful, because now there's maybe a process of like
healing. They're stepping out of
and so I
rather
feel like,
than the clinching
and having this
it's hard for me.
And we've had this conversation for 10-13 years, and this is the first time that I've actually heard you claim those things,
which I think is why he wanted to talk about it on YouTube. So we can't go back now.
I feel that even as I hear Erin talking about it, she's being kind of coy and vague and like, well, I don't want to, and I think that when we do that, when we don't name what is true and what has happened, it still festers within our soul.
Yeah, it does have more power, and I know that conceptually, and people, you all know this too, right? Like, some of these things, but naming it is so powerful. There's such power in naming something, and power for good too. I do know that there would be movement and more of a release with letting go. It is still a challenge.
And I think that just practically for recognizing as couples, like this is the kind of stuff that happens. Like this flood is terrible. It's awful. I wish it didn't happen. I could go my whole life without having my home flood. But also it's not just that the home flooded, it's just that it touches all these other parts.
The things that Stephen just named, like all those little, this happened, this
of
happened.
Erin's story.
It
And
brings
then
all those little feelings, or those moments, feelings back out.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say little feelings.
And like as a couple, we have to be willing to like step into that and talk about it. And I imagine for y'all as couples and as partners that there are these stories, there are these things that you are so afraid to name. And that just means you're human. And that just means that it's hard. But I would say that I do think that there is great freedom in naming it. And that if it can be named, then healing can begin. But if you cannot name it, then you cannot be healed. Because you're not dealing with what is true and what is real. And so I think for us, perhaps we are entering into like a new phase of healing, as a couple. I don't know, but I am curious for each of y'all as couples, like what are the things that need to be named, and can you name them? And we would encourage you to do so. We're trying to do it. This event has stirred those things up.
And even if you've done it before, I've done this before. It's just you have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I have to keep doing it, and I don't want to. I feel done. I was one more story, and then I'll be done.
Okay.
There's this girl in my graduate school class, Kelsey Timpson, although I'm sure she's gotten, who knows, maybe her name has changed by now, but she told me in one class, like, Erin, I hope one day you will be released from your birdcage. And I knew what she was talking about, because it's this. I was talking about all of this a decade ago.
That you're living trapped.
Yeah.
Because you won't say what is true.
Yeah, because I have a hard time saying what is true.
She won't say what's true.
And I feel like I go in and out. I sort of like, I let the door open a little bit, close it, open. I even fly out occasionally, but I get so scared. And then even if I'm like out on a limb and that your house floods, I find myself recoiling. Like I am back in that bird cage, locked in, tight and scared. And it makes sense. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's so human. It's so human.
But it's not where I want to live. I don't want to be so scared that I'm rigid all the time and just living clenched. I'm clenched for now. I'm probably going to be clenched for a little while, and that is our work.
Yeah, and I have my part too. And this isn't just Erin.
We're going to come back to Stephen's part.
Erin was the one who kind of this conversation came up for her, but we both have those things that we need to.
We all have those things.
Yeah, to name. So. Sit down, talk with your partner.
That's where we are.
Trying to name what it is we are afraid to say. And
we don't want to know what we know.
Yeah.
Afraid to know. I'm afraid to know that I had some traumatic events.
Yeah. So we would love to know how your conversation is going. We'd love to know if there's things that have helped you in your conversation. So please comment below. Remember, like it, share it. Subscribe to the channel.
Thanks for being present with us in all of this.
Yeah. We'll
see you next time.
See you next time.